of Kwale. Now, away from that, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees and SUPKEM have launched an initiative that will see them cooperate on matters to do with refugee education. SUPKEM has this Ramadan season started a fundraiser that will go a long way in enhancing education for refugee children in the country. To discuss this further, we have Ambassador Mohammed Afe, who is also the UNHCR Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa. Thank you for joining us on News Center this morning. Now, it's quite a noble cause, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees and SUPKEM coming together to launch a campaign that will see hundreds of thousands of refugee children go to school. But what are the challenges facing refugee children and refugees in general in Kenya?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. This is an important campaign that we have partnered with SUPKEM this holy month of Ramadan. And just to give you the context, that we have nearly slightly over 480,000 refugees in Kenya, right. Most prominently in the two camps of Kakuma and Dadaab. And half of the population we have in these camps are school-going children, which means nearly 50%. And as we speak today, 50% of that school-going children actually don't access education in the camps. And then 75% even of those ones who access don't proceed beyond secondary school. And nearly 85% of those who finish secondary school don't even go to the universities, tertiary education. Right. And it's even worse when you come to the girl education in the camps, where we have nearly 80% of the girls in the camps actually don't even step into a classroom. They don't have access. So the challenges are enormous, and it might be important to note that these are children born in Kenya. We're talking about third generation, in some cases fourth generation of refugees who are born in Kenya. They know this country. They don't know the country of origin, right. And they have hopes and aspirations as much as the rest of Kenyans have. And the challenges that has faced us as UNHCR was to provide, to access the resources required, because substantial resources are required to be able to support the education of this young population, give them hope. And this is why this month of Ramadan, we felt that using this spirit of the month of Ramadan, we could be able to partner with the Supreme Council of Kenya Muslims, and we really are grateful to them.
Let's talk about the population that you just mentioned. Slightly more than 480,000 refugees in Kenya. 77% of those are women and children, and majority of those children of school-going age cannot access education. How much money is required then to ensure this kind of education? Because I understand there was an iftar dinner, fundraising dinner that you organized that raised more than 15 million shillings in 2 hours, which was quite impressive.
Yeah, first of all, if we speak about the overall budget, it's substantial. I mean, it's not something that really we thought we could raise in one event.
Right.
What we wanted to do in this particular event, which SUPKEM partnered with us, was first of all to raise awareness in the country. Because I think it's important that the country knows within the borders of Kenya, there is a population of young children, youth, who are not necessarily Kenyans, but who are born in this country, who have a situation where we could consider it a crisis in terms of access to education. First of all, this was the most important message we wanted to pass.
Right.
And then the second one, of course, was to see how much we could be able to raise. And it's the whole of the month of Ramadan. So it's just started, it's just that event that you speak about where we raised 15 million was only one of it. But the campaign continues for the whole month. After we raise awareness and we see how much we could be able to be able to achieve, and then we see of what we achieve, what effect it will have. Because we already have education programs in the camps. We have schools in the camps, but they're not sufficient. We need books. We need more qualified teachers. Quite a number of the teachers we have, in fact, are former refugee children who might not have the necessary training, but you know, they volunteer and they'll be able to help. We have got partners, education partners in these camps in the country, and not only actually in Kenya. If you look at this crisis of refugees, it's within the Horn of Africa. So this is not only a problem unique to Kenya. It is a problem in Ethiopia, it's a problem in Uganda, it's a problem across in Sudan, South Sudan, where we have got refugee camps present that we help. And therefore, We think that globally, actually, 1% of the refugee population have access to education, to tertiary education, so to speak. So this is the global problem that we have around the world. But in the context of Kenya, I think that we as Kenyans and this society that have been very generous enough to have been able to host these refugees for such a long period of time will also perhaps need to see how best they can be able to help, because without education, these children risk becoming hopeless.
Absolutely, and that's what I want us to discuss, because you visited Dadaab and Kakuma camps, extensively. Really share with us your experience and the experience of these youth, especially those of school-going children. What conditions they're exposed to, especially without an education?
Well, first of all, I have seen in these camps young people who are eager to learn, who really want to make a difference to their life, but who don't have, all of them, unfortunately, don't have the access to the facilities for them to learn. Right. This means, therefore, if you become a young man or a young woman who has no access to education, you become hopeless, you don't become self-reliant, and then essentially it means, therefore, if you don't become self-reliant, you become a burden to the society, a burden to yourself, and then eventually, because we hope that these young people will return back to the country of origin, because we have got more than 15 nationalities, or even more, I think, in our camps from the countries around neighboring Kenya. We want these young people to go back to their country one day, but we want them to go back when they have the skills, when they have education, when they can be able to contribute to the reconstruction of the country of origin. For that to happen, we must be able to give them education here at home, so that when they return, then they can become self-reliant, become very, very hopeful and useful to the community back of the country of origin.
Right. You mentioned, Ambassador, when we began that education for the youth, the refugee children, is a problem, but even more of a problem for the girl child or the girl refugees in these camps. Is this an issue to do with funding? Is it more an issue to do with culture and traditions, and how best can we ensure that we have more refugee girls going to school?
First of all, funding is the biggest challenge we have. This is why we are in a campaign mode to be able to assist the refugee youth. But more particularly with the girls, you actually stated it very, very well. We have cultural barriers. We have, traditions. So there's need to engage in more civic education. There are early marriages. You will find in these camps children who are parents. Barely 8, 15, 17, 18, they already are parents. So that already is a challenge. And that is because they have no access to some form of education that can be able to make them busy and to be self-reliant. So part of our campaign, also targeting girls, which is very, very important. By the way, we realize girls do much more better in the camps than boys, given equal opportunity. But that requires effort, that requires resources. And I hope that through this campaign this month, we will be able to raise substantial amount of money. We raised 15 million, as you said, in 2 hours. We would like to thank all those Kenyans who participated. And this is not a call only to Muslims. This is a call to the society, Muslims, Christians. And in fact, in that particular evening, we had interfaith leaders attending, because education support has no religious barrier. It has no religious connotation. So we are appealing to Kenyans of goodwill, both Muslims, Christians, businesses, small businesses, big businesses. For those who continue to support our work, we say thank you. But this campaign was meant to broaden the net, because that the new way of doing the management of refugee affairs around the world is what we call the whole of society approach, where the society participates in the protection and support of refugees. Right. In the past, it used to be seen to be a UN affair. These refugees are UN affair. But now I think increasingly we are beginning to understand that this is not only a UN affair, it's an affair for all of us. It's not only for UNHCR.
And we'll be getting to how individuals can get involved in this campaign specifically. But let's listen in to refugee children speaking about the importance of refugee education.
Thank you.
Education is the only ticket into a space that does not define me as a refugee. Because how many doors do we have? They're so limited. You get somewhere and you introduce yourself like, I'm a Luo, I'm a refugee. The moment you mention you are a refugee, it's like a door gets shut on your face. They don't take you for your skills, for who you are. You're taken for the label. And that label comes with so many things. You are a terrorist.
So education for refugee children is a gift we will give them. And it's a gift for life, I call it. So about 73% of refugee children do not have access to secondary education. And about 87% do not have access to tertiary education, university. And about 44% of these children who are supposed to be in the school, they are not in the school. And if you look at it from girls, the child girl point of view, is even the situation is very drastic.
This iftar is to fundraise for refugee youth who do not have an opportunity to have tertiary education. And it's not for refugee students who are Muslims, it's for everyone, regardless of their religion, regardless of their faith.
And with us in studio is Ambassador Mohammed Afeif from the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, which has partnered with SUPKEM to ensure education for refugee children in the country. Ambassador, how can individuals, companies, institutions get involved in this initiative?
Well, first of all, I think that this initiative, we have launched a public campaign with an M-Pesa account, and we want to inform that you can use M-Pesa number 329378, account Ramadan. Donations that you think that can be able to support, and no amount of money is a small amount of money for us.
Right.
Every amount of money from 10 shillings, 1 shilling, $1, $100, millions, all that you can be able to support this particular cause is really highly welcome. You could also do a check to UNHCR so that they can be able to use that money to support refugee education in this country. We thought that if we focus on education, it is a solution. Because in this country today, the Kenyan government and UNHCR were working very hard in order to find a durable solution for the refugee situation in this country.
Right.
And one of the important tools that I think we need to use is to equip these young people, to educate them, to skill them, so they can get out of the camp and become useful citizens around the world, the country of origin, the host country, or elsewhere that they think they can be able to use those skills.
Well, let's talk about, like you mentioned, more than 480,000 refugees in Kenya. What more has the UNHCR done for them? Because very recently we had refugees accusing the agency of failing to remit their monthly dues. What kind of support currently is the refugee population receiving from the agency?
Well, first of all, I think that we are the primary agency mandated by the UN to provide protection to refugees, to do advocacy work. Part of the work I'm doing now, being in your studio, is the kind of support that we're giving to refugees, to do advocacy, to explain their situation, to give them the voice, because not all of them can come and speak in your studios or have access. And then above all, you know, we have got the care and maintenance in the camp. We partner with UN agencies, UNICEF, WFP, other agencies, our NGO partners, in order to provide support to these refugees. And you know that we would like to thank Kenya, for instance. You know, Kenya is one country that has formally now included and signed a policy of inclusion for refugee education in this country, which means, therefore, these refugees might have access and support being included in the national programs. But we want to appeal to our partners, to the international community, to support a country like Kenya, to provide the necessary financial support, so that then we can lift some of this, or share the burden of responsibility of care, maintenance, and even providing solutions for these refugees. Kenya is one country that has led in this sub-region, because in terms of providing examples, best practices on how to support refugees, welfare and care. And in particular, the president of this country actually did host in March 2017 a regional summit to find a durable solution to the refugee situation in Kenya and in the sub-region. And therefore, we as UNHCR do the primary advocacy, protection, and support to the refugees, not only around the world, but in particular in the Horn of Africa, to the refugees in this country.
All right, let's talk about the concerns that have been there with the existence of the Dadaab and Kakuma refugee camps, the recent issues of possible closure or threats of closure. We have had the repatriation of refugees back to their country. Some say it was forceful, some say it was voluntary. How have these issues destabilized the refugee situation in the country?
First of all, we would like to thank, and I want to repeat this, that hospitality of this country, Kenya, and for the generosity of its people and the host community. We think that a refugee camp should not be a permanent feature. But we are dealing with a region that's not very stable, with a very protracted case. The Somalia, particularly the Somalia security situation, which has been very protracted. The Kenya government within the regional framework has got forces inside Somalia to stabilize. So once the country stabilizes, be it Somalia or South Sudan, which are the majority of the refugees we have in this country, we hope that these refugees will return home and reconstruct their lives back home. However, there has been concerns raised by the government of Kenya over a couple of times, particularly on Dadaab. And in the context of Dadaab, we had an active discussion to find solutions, because this is one particular complex which has got many populations which require several sets of solutions. There are, for instance, genuine refugees who are present in the camp. There are intermarriages, the population as a result of intermarriages. There are some Kenyans, unfortunately, who found themselves trapped in the refugee camps. They went in early in the search for some of the opportunities that are available in the camps that perhaps are not available outside within the host community, and which have now been trapped inside, and we need to find a solution for them. So all this is an engagement policy that we currently are doing with the government of Kenya in order to find a solution, both for Kakuma and for Dadaab. But more urgently now, it is for Dadaab, because this is where the government has raised substantial concerns. However, all these returns are voluntary. There is no possibility of any refugee going back to the country against his own will. And this, the government of Kenya has declared that all returns become dignified. It becomes a matter that the refugee himself or herself think that's time to go back home. And we will help. For those who voluntarily decide to go back, we, of course, as UNHCR and other agencies that are working in the camp, we assist them.
All right.
And therefore, I think that that's a matter that's an active discussion, and I'm not worried about forceful or brutal closure of the camp.
All right. Finally, back to the topic in hand here. Education is the fourth of the Sustainable Development Goals, achieving education for all. How far are we really in the country, in the Horn of Africa, and especially in terms of refugee education, from attaining that?
Actually, we are very far away. We have substantial challenges. Globally, we have only about 1% of refugee youth who are accessing universities. Here, at least in the Horn of Africa, we are about 10%. But 90% of this youth, nearly 90% of the youth population don't have access. For those who have access, at least even to the basics, don't have access beyond that. And therefore, these problems are massive. The result of which you see large number of youth migrating, taking dangerous forays into high seas in the search for greener pastures outside, and in the process risking their lives. Some, of course, can become victims of criminal elements and get trapped in criminal activities. So we need to ensure that as we speak about the country, we also speak about the population living within this country who also require attention, support, in order to skill them, to give them hope.
All right.
But the problems are massive in terms of finding resources. This is why a campaign like this one in this country, one we are going to do in South Africa over the weekend. Similarly, a similar campaign is happening in South Africa. A similar campaign is actually happening in the Middle East. So it's a global campaign the High Commissioner has launched in order to seek the support within this month of Ramadan to attract more funding to offset some of the challenges that we have in the education sector.
Many thanks for speaking to us. That is Ambassador Mohammed Afe, who is also the UNHCR Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa, speaking to us about an initiative between the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees as well as the SUPKEM there for an initiative to launch a campaign to raise money for the education of refugee children in the country.